guys, it's Lindsay at the blog Repurpose and Upcycle, and today I'm going to talk to you about wood stain versus wood dye and the difference between both and why you would use both. Now, most of you have probably heard about wood stain before, but I'm guessing a lot of you haven't ever heard of wood dye or know how to use it. So I'm going to cover both, and I'm going to cover the pros and cons of both. Let's talk about wood stain for a minute. Wood stain is normally used to change the color of a piece of wood or darken it. You apply a wood stain either using a foam brush or a rag like this. Now, let's talk about wood dye for a second. Wood dye is similar to wood stain, but it's much more translucent. And what I mean by that is, while wood stain tends to sit on top of the piece of wood or the piece of veneer, wood dye, they're smaller particles, and so they really soak into the wood. So a lot of people use wood dye when they don't want to cover up like the wood grain, when they have a really pretty wood grain that they want to shine through and they're worried the wood stain will cover it up. Now, the good part about that is wood dye will seep through it, so it's pretty permanent. But if you want to go back over it and say sand it down, it's very hard to do. Wood stain, like I said, tends to sit on top of the wood, whereas wood dye really penetrates the wood and sits below the top layer. So if you want to get rid of the color, it's very difficult. Let's talk about wood dye a little more. Wood dye normally comes like this, or it comes in a powdered form, and you mix it with a solvent like water or denatured alcohol. You can also mix it in something like shellac or a water-based finish. This can prove helpful if you're looking to create a certain color that you want to mix in with your finishing coat. Now, if you're using the wood dye by itself, it always needs a top coat if you're not mixing it in with one. Whereas with the wood stain, a lot of times they already come with a finishing coat or a protective layer for the wood. Okay, so I'm going to show you guys how to apply the wood stain and the wood dye. Now, first of all, always use gloves, especially with the wood dye. Since the wood dye is so penetrating, once it gets on your hands, I promise it does take about a week to go away. I've learned that the hard way. So grab some gloves. And we will begin. Now, you can use a foam brush, you can use a regular brush. Most stains and dyes aren't applied with a regular brush, although you can do it. Or I'm using a lint-free cloth. Now, if you're really doing a piece of furniture, a lot of times you're going to want to dab it with water or use a wood conditioner to make sure that the finish is even. Otherwise, when I do this, you'll probably see certain areas will absorb the stain or the dye more. So if you want an even coat, put a layer of water over it or use a wood conditioner first. I'm going to start with the wood stain. I'm just going to dab a little bit on here, and I'm going to go in the direction of the wood grain. And this particular stain is the weathered oak. It's more of a gray color, so it's not really dark. And I might have to go over it with a few different layers to actually get the finish that I want. So, with a dark wood stain, a lot of times you have to go over it with a clean rag and wipe the excess off. But because I want this to be kind of dark, I'm going to leave it on there. Okay, so this is the wood stain. Now I'm going to show you guys the wood dye. Now, the wood dye, I have mixed this with water. Whatever you buy, whether you buy this kind or you buy the powder packet, it will give you instructions as to how to mix it, like how many parts this versus how many parts water or denatured alcohol, or the finishing coat, whatever you're going to mix it with. So same thing, I'm just going to mix my lint-free cloth in my solution. This is my water mixed with the wood dye. Once I got a little bit on there, I go with the wood grain. And when we give these a minute to dry, you will see how the wood stain is going to sit on top of the wood, and the wood dye will really seep in the wood grain, and you'll be able to see the wood grain better with the wood dye than you will the wood stain. Now, I want to show you guys the difference between the woods. This is the wood dye and this is the wood stain. They're slightly different colors, so you can't totally compare apples to apples, but they're close. But mainly what I want to show you is on the wood dye has really seeped into the wood, and the wood grain, you can see the dark lines of the wood grain. That's why we say that wood dye is more translucent. It will seep into it where you can really see, and it almost like it outlines that wood grain. Whereas with the wood stain, you can see the wood grain is still light because the wood stain has sat on top of the layer of wood, whereas the wood grain below it has not been affected by the wood stain. Another great tip, you can mix these together for a really rich dark wood stain. Now, I would use the wood dye first so it'll really seep into the wood grain, and then put the wood stain on top of it. So to get technical, the main difference between the wood dye and the wood stain is the wood dye is generally mixed with a solvent, and the wood dye is really tiny small particles, almost like paint. The wood stain, on the other hand, has much larger particles, so that's why it tends to sit on top of the wood. The wood stain, on the other hand, has the really large molecules that don't penetrate the wood, so that's generally why the wood stain will sit on top of the wood layer and the wood dye will penetrate it. Thanks for stopping in today, guys, and I hope you've learned something about the difference between wood dye versus wood stain. If you like this video, please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Have a great day.